Hello, and welcome to another episode of myNewsWrap, news from the world of SAP, Microsoft, and the world in between. So, what was up this week in this large ecosystem? First of all, one reference to a topic that I have talked about last week about an SAP community call with the SAP CTO Jürgen Müller that was given, I think, 2 weeks ago. If you missed it, you can now re-watch it, re-fetch all the information. It's now available on YouTube. And yeah, I have referenced, as usual, the link in the show notes. Now, as Sapphire kicked off last week with the keynote, of course, there is some aftermath about the keynote. I mean, Sapphire is still running, is still going on. But of course, the announcements from the keynote were picked up, and I want to highlight one blog post by Joshua Greenbaum about, as I mentioned last week, one of the biggest announcements about the SAP Business Network Initiative, where SAP wants to become the Facebook of the business network. And Joshua kind of picks up the topic and walks through about the things that have been mentioned, and also what might be interesting for not those big companies, and also what might be some glitches that come along. So yeah, interesting read from my perspective. And then one of the highlights this week, at least for me, because I really like that format, Holger Müller from Constellation R and Martin Fischer had their quarterly SAP review, which I really like. And you can, if you missed it, you can catch up either on, I think it's Periscope. I have referenced the link to the video, or Martin was really fast. You can simply watch it as a podcast, listen to it as a podcast on SAP Coffee Corner Radio. So it's also available there. Main topic, of course, is SAP Sapphire and the announcements coming from there. And then one thing that I also would like to raise your attention to concerning Sapphire. I mean, we all know that the demos might be a bit made up, or it might be lab previews, which is perfectly fine from my perspective. But there was one tweet that crossed my path about a demo of Signavio, which I haven't seen it, but according to the one who tweeted it, John Appleby, it was quite impressive. And then when taking a closer look at the screenshot and at the simulation, it became obvious for those of you who know Signavio that this simulation wouldn't run because there is an BPM element in the flow that isn't supported in simulations. And well, there was a little bit of chat going around, and the point is that exactly it's not supported. So the simulation that they have shown during the demo does not work. And the answer is, well, no customer requested that feature to have this BPM element working in the simulation. So, well, the fair question is, why do you show it then? So if you're watching things about Signavio, then I would say, for at least for this Sapphire, watch out, because it might be a bit too breathtaking, and reality might hit harder than you think when it comes to using it. Something that I want to draw your attention to, because last week I said I think SAP is a bit struggling with the Signavio topic, and obviously they did not yet put a real handle on the topic. Now to another topic that was handed out at the beginning of this year, the SAP Developer Insight Survey that was, I think, took place at January and February this year, and now the results are there. There is one blog post by Thomas Grassl about that one with some highlighted key values, and there is also a reference to a report where you can take a closer look at. I mean, take it with a grain of salt. This survey focuses on SAP developers, so the point of view is really mostly SAP developers. So it's not from my perspective, at least what I have seen, not from the broader ecosystem, I would say. It's mostly experienced SAP developers. And there is one thing that you have to kind of look over. All the graphics in there have an issue. So all there are spaces, there are white spaces in there, absolutely wildly mixed. So it's not quite fun to watch this, and I hope SAP will fix it. At least they know that there is a problem with the graphic stuff. Then with this more general topics, let's switch to the business technology platform. There is one really cool tutorial from SAP about using the event mesh on SAP Business Technology Platform. The code for this tutorial is also available on the GitHub repo, which is currently, unfortunately, an internal GitHub repo. I hope that they will push it out soon. As usual, that's kind of an error that they often make when they publish blog posts. But let's see. Yeah, it's talking about the event mesh. It's really an extensive walkthrough, so even without the code snippets, you can follow along that one. And it's not, as the title would guide you through, restricted to China, Shanghai region, but you can do that basically everywhere where you have an event mesh on your business technology platform. Now, there was another announcement or news around the area of custom extensions for S/4HANA. As you might know, there is a practical guide for custom extension implementation, and that one was updated now in May and was released quite recently, which of course also tackles the topic of SAP Business Technology Platform and side-by-side extensions, and also the topic that I mentioned last week about the new option of on-stack extensions, which is kind of an embedded steampunk, at least that's how it was called during the last TechEd. Now with that, one news from the area of the cloud application programming model, or more an announcement. The recap, the community conference about the cloud application programming model will take place not too far away on 25th of June. And since yesterday, the agenda is available. Yeah, quite packed. So a lot of talks, partly contributions, of course, by SAP, but a lot of contributions also by the wider community. Also talking about the adoption of the cloud application programming model on different scenarios. So that's really interesting. I think really quite worth watching. And what's important, you do not have to register. You just can go to the link and enjoy. Then to Kyma. One blog post that I would like to highlight in the area of Kyma is one about writing a webhook in Kyma for a chatbot. A quite short and crisp walkthrough about how to do that, creating your function, exposing your function. And what I especially liked about the blog post is the sentence at the end. All in all, it was a little easier than how I deployed my Python script via the Cloud Foundry CLI. So yeah, I think Kyma really is quite helpful with building extensions. And I also think that it's, depending on your type of extension, easier than Cloud Foundry. So yeah, that's why I like it, but I anyway like Kyma. Now with that, let's switch to the Microsoft part of the house and to my beloved Azure Functions. There was one announcement by the product management of Azure Functions. So what's new with .NET on Azure Functions in June. And the big announcement was that there is a sneak peek for the .NET 6.0 support on Azure Functions with the new version of the Azure Function Core tools. currently version 3. Now the preview is based on version 4. And you can now take a look how those things behave with .NET 6.0, which is planned to be supported right from the start. So when .NET is released, there should be full support with Azure Functions. And the important thing here is, for those who use Azure Functions with .NET, you now have two options how to run them. You can run them in isolated processes, or you can run them as in-process functions in the same process as the function worker. So with .NET 5, only the isolated process was possible. With .NET Core 3.1, it was only the in-process function. So you can now really take a look at that. And I hope that this in-process function availability of .NET 6.0 will also kind of shine through to the other languages, because they right from the start only had the isolated process function. So let's see and keep our fingers crossed that something is coming there too. Then another short and crisp blog post about building Azure Static Web Apps, making use of the CLI, which should quite quickly get you started with developing Azure Static Web Apps completely locally. So the blog post is quite short because there is not that much to do just to get up and running. And there are some additional links on getting you deeper into the topic. So I think one of the hottest things and one of the things that you should take a look at when working on Azure. Then another blog post from the real life, so to say, by a company called Azure, and they're from the notifications team of Azure, who make use of Azure Durable Functions for all the notifications that they send out to customers about the state of their order and so on, and all the service emails that you get. And that was quite impressive. So it was 100K email notifications per day sent out to Azure's customers, making use of durable functions. So that's really quite a number. And I really like this blog post because it doesn't only walk you through the architecture and what they used in order to make this notification thingy work, but they also dive into topics that are often forgotten, like cleaning up the storage of the history in the instances when you have to deal with that huge amount of durable functions in your system. Then another video dealing with Azure Functions, or with Cosmos DB change feeds and Azure Functions, which is kind of, I would even call it pattern when you work with Cosmos DB and functions to make use of the change feed. If you have not yet seen or worked with Cosmos DB and have not heard about the change feed, watch this video because that's really a great functionality. Then a last contribution to the serverless area. There was one stream about how to automate your office space with Azure Durable Functions. Quite interesting scenario, quite interesting use case, how you can do that, how you can make use of this workflow type of handling that you have with Durable Functions in order to automate some tasks in your office. And if you take a closer look at the video, you will also see a nice contribution for VS Code called VS Code Pads. Now with that, I'll switch to the more general news around the Azure ecosystem. One thing that I came across this week was the API portal, which is an open source API portal under MIT license published by Azure, by the Azure team, which is based on the official offering of Microsoft. And you can use that in order to build your first API portal for free and support a GitHub-based workflow for publishing and consuming APIs. So if you start with that topic, or if you have the need for an API portal, maybe that's really worth a very first look how to use it before you switch to another API portal provider. Then from the area of low code, the Power Platform, there was one announcement this week about the introduction of the modern app designer, which is now available in preview. So you can now, you have now in preview a new experience with respect to designing your Power Apps, with the restriction that they have to be model-driven apps. So yeah, if you're working there in that area, take a look at it, because I think it's quite useful, quite nice experience for working with that stuff. And then from the area of, let's say, DevOps, there is one GitHub repo that I would like to highlight about a template analyzer. So if you are working with our ARM templates, so the Azure Resource Manager templates, you might want to analyze them and check out if they follow the best practices available out there. And yeah, with this template analyzer, you can do that. It's currently not yet released for production usage, but I mean, at least for development purposes, and at least giving you a cross-check, I think that's quite useful. Then one more thing from the Azure space. I announced, I think 2 weeks ago after build, that the Azure Web PubSub service is available. If you want to have a short description in the form of a video, here you go. Azure Friday brought out a new video dedicating one session exactly to the service of Azure Web PubSub. Yeah, with that, short switch to the area of SAP and Microsoft. So there is not too much news that I have there. Just one session from Sapphire Now that I kind of want to reference. There was a session by Thomas Saueressig on building a resilient and sustainable supply chain with several guests. And one of them was Scott Guthrie, who talked about how Microsoft is adopting the supply chain. And they also talked a bit about the collaboration of SAP and Microsoft. So not too deep insights, but I also wouldn't expect that from Sapphire. But if you want to know how Microsoft is using that stuff, then take a look at this part of the video. So it's not exclusively between Scott and Thomas, but there are a lot of other guests in there. So you have to scroll a bit through the video to find the right spot. And then one topic that I want to raise your attention to. If you're using Azure Logic apps, you might have seen that there are connectors to SAP, ERP connectors, but there is not yet an official SAP OData connector. However, Microsoft is working on that topic, and there is a private preview for an official SAP OData connector for Azure Logic apps. If you want to participate in that preview, there is a link referenced in the reply to the blog post, to the tweet of David Berg, which guides you to a list where you can sign up for the private preview. And hopefully you get then access to that one and can try out the official SAP OData connector. With that, I would like to switch to the area of education and events. First of all, I have a little bit of a section around CNCF, the Cloud Native Interactive Landscape, because there was quite some announcements this week that came out. First of all, I guess most of you know the Cloud Native Landscape that is available on an interactive version. And if you take a look at that one, it's just huge. It's basically overwhelming what's available in that ecosystem. So if you start with that, you just get completely stunned and basically paralyzed. Where should I start? Now, there is a trail map for you that's available on GitHub that helps you starting with your cloud native journey. And that's what I basically want to highlight. So don't get overwhelmed by the interactive landscape. go to that trail map and then walk through and grow as you go into this ecosystem. Now, in order to make your life even more comfortable within the area of CNCF, there are two formats that they are now pushing out to help you get an understanding of the different areas. First of all, there is this week, it started off this week, the Cloud Native TV show that is starting now with 10 new community shows on absolutely different topic. Also, anyone can contribute to that. So if you have a topic, you can bring that up. And that's something that is quite cool. And there's also another format that's a bit hidden on the YouTube channel of CNCF that might also come in quite handy. That has now its, I think, 4th edition or something like that. It's called Cloud Native Live. You really have to walk through the videos. There is no playlist for that. But it's also community-based on absolutely different topics around the area of CNCF. Like there have been 2 sessions, for example, on crossplane, which is also quite interesting. Talking about cloud-native applications, there is also a playlist that I want to highlight from Microsoft Azure, which was also updated, I think, 2 weeks ago. Which now contains 25 videos all around the area of cloud-native application development, but of course with a focus on what Azure has under the belt in order to support you with that. And then one thing that took place already quite some time ago, I think it was end of April, not 100% sure, which is Conf 42. Cloud Native 2021, which was a one-day conference with a lot of tracks all around the topic of cloud native development. And now finally the official watch list playlist is available on YouTube. So if you missed that conference, like me, you now have the chance to catch up with that topic. So something to watch for the weekend. And as we have now talked a lot about online conferences, and currently Sapphire is taking place as an online conference, and maybe you want to bring your meetup to a new level and starting an online conference, there is one blog post that you might want to read before that by a regular guest on my podcast, Tobias Hoffmann, about suggestions for online conference organizers, which highlights quite some important points about who is the real person in the center of an online conference, about agenda building, which is something that I think nobody yet, even Microsoft, has not perfectly fiddled out how to do that in an intuitive and comfortable way, and a lot of other information, I think, based on one topic about time zones based or initiated by Sapphire Now experiences. But that's really interesting blog post, kind of a different story, but definitely worth reading. Then I would like to switch to the last section of my podcast concerning developer productivity. I have one tip that was a tweet by Will Velida. When you're working with Azure Functions and you want to do local development and want to fetch the settings from your function app, which is somewhere in Azure, there is one really cool command from the function core tools that he highlighted in the tweet that will replicate you the settings to your local settings.json. So that's really, really cool. And I think really helpful if you're working with Azure Functions. And then one last thing, nothing brand new, but maybe not that well known. We all work a lot with GitHub, and GitHub is pushing a lot of new things out. And they're really open for feedback and for discussions and for making suggestions for improvements. And if you do not know where to put your feedback, there is one central landing page which references all the different feedback channels, for example, for, of course, the new stuff like code spaces, like discussions. Then, of course, on the GitHub mobile experience. And there is also one channel for general feedback. So if you have feedback, if you want to make suggestions, this is the place to go, or at least this is the landing page where you can then give your dedicated feedback on the different topics. And yeah, with that, I'm at the end of this week's myNewsWrap. I hope I had some interesting news for you, at least a lot to catch up if you missed that on YouTube from different conferences. And with that, yeah, I wish you a nice Friday, a nice weekend, and see you next week. Until then, bye.